Hello again. Now, an agricultural economist is warning that Russia's invasion of Ukraine could have serious consequences for Africa's food supply. African countries, including South Africa, import billions of dollars in agricultural products from both European countries. These include wheat, sunflower oil, barley and soybeans. Russia's military action has already resulted in a sharp increase in the prices of these products. Well, let's discuss this further this afternoon with Agricultural Business Chamber of South Africa Chief Economist Wandile Sihlobo. Wandile, good afternoon. Thank you very much for your time. You know, one of the things that one always wonders about when a conflict happens in somewhere in the world far away is, will this affect us? Why should we care? But if this Russia-Ukraine conflict has real impact on us in South Africa and a number of other African countries, even in the agricultural sector. How big is this?
Absolutely, Dan. It has an impact broadly. And I think one of the key things that we should never underestimate is just the significance of both Russia and Ukraine in global grain and oilseed supply. I mean, these countries together, they make up roughly 24% or so of global wheat exports. And on maize, about 14% of global maize exports. And when you talk about sunflower oil, you're talking about just over 60%. Now, what that does then is that when there are conflicts in those regions, you tend to see the impact mirrored in global agricultural commodity prices. And that filters through into South Africa and across the global market. And that's the first point of entry or of impact that we are seeing in as far as the food industry.
Yeah, and just to give our viewers a sense, when I read your article, I did not believe it's really across the length and breadth of the continent. The likes of Egypt, Sudan, Nigeria, Tanzania, Algeria, Kenya, and us in the south here, I mean, some of the major importers of grain and other agricultural products like sunflower seeds from Ukraine and Russia.
Absolutely. And I think with us, then we might be less impacted in as far as the physical commodity, because yes, Russia and Ukraine, you do see them appear in our wheat import volumes, and to an extent also in sunflower. But I would say the moment you begin talking about North Africa and to an extent East Africa, those folks are dependent more heavily on those commodities. We have a choice where we buy some of these products in Europe, wheat in Europe and some of the wheat in Australia and in the US. But the one thing we cannot escape, all of us, is the impact it's having on global prices. And now that's the channel that we worry on. And I think then you have to think about this in a sense that we are seeing this conflict already coming in an environment where general food prices are elevated because of those droughts were in South America, and also the rising demand for soybeans and the other vegetable oils in China. So it adds in an environment that is already of elevated food price inflation. So we're all looking what the disruption will be and for how long.
Yeah, and it adds to an environment where in South Africa, for example, just one small example, the recent storms and rains having damaged some kind of crops, while we had drought in the likes of the Eastern Cape. So we are facing all of these challenges. Just from an export side, from an agricultural side, I mean, South Africa does export, and I'm told like the likes of Stellenbosch-based zest fruit. Just one example, they export apples, pears, and other fruits, I mean citrus stuff, to Russia. Now, this war would affect even South African agricultural exporters.
Absolutely, Dan, because, I mean, if you look at them in the numbers term, you have roughly 7% or so of our citrus exports go to Russia, and also around about 12% or so if you mix apples and pears, they go to Russia. So I guess all of that will depend on the disruption physically on the exports, as well as the form of payments. But I must say that we're still at the early stages. Much of the events are unfolding before us, so we are watching. But those are entries that we worried about. But a quick point here, Dan, to add is to say, we tend to emphasize the consumer impact, which I was talking about in as far as the food prices. But a point can be made to say, for those that are at least in the grains and the oilseeds, farming those commodities, whenever then the prices do see a bit of a surge, for those farmers who have the volume not heavily affected by floods and droughts, they at least benefit to a certain extent. But all of this depends on how long the disruption lasts and much is unfolding, as I said before us.
Yeah. Now, of course, a rise in prices from a consumer perspective is painful, but from a farmer perspective, it might be beneficial.
It might be beneficial, especially then, I mean, you coming now, these dynamics, in a year where farmers experience really a tough period. You will remember then at the start of the year that folks were paying plus 50% for fertilizer inputs and all of these things. So any rise in the commodity prices, it assists them to a certain extent. But later on in a year, if assuming the war or conflict would be prolonged for a period, that would also now begin to influence some of the inputs that farmers will need. Because Russia is not just big on selling these products that we're talking about, grains, but it's also amongst the top 10 producers of fertilizer. So disruptions there do influence fertilizer, oil prices, as you said nicely in your introduction. So we hope, all of us, that this doesn't last for long.
Yeah, and you, in the article that you wrote, your opinion piece that made us to request to talk to you this afternoon in eNCA, towards the end, you make a very good point, and I just want to read it very quickly for our viewers. You say, correctly so, there is still a lot that's not known about the geopolitical challenges that lie ahead. I mean, earlier today, our President Matamela Cyril Ramaphosa weighing in and saying, mediation, please, United Nations Security Council, step in there and mediate. We have South Africans present in both countries. We have an embassy in Kiev, Ukraine. Just a few hours ago, we're told Russian troops have moved into Kiev. So we don't know what the future really holds. But the longer this lasts, African countries like South Africa that depend on importing the wheat and other grain stuff and other oils from Russia and Ukraine stand to worry. I mean, that's really a big worry into the short, medium term, isn't it?
Absolutely. I mean, this is not good for anyone, at least for those of us in Africa. And I think there many European countries also feel that way. So we are watching and seeing for how long this will unfold. But are you correct in that observation that the key thing is how can it be mediated and be resolved sooner, as the president was appealing earlier?
Wandile Sihlobo, thank you very much for your time on your insights this afternoon on eNCA. He's, of course, Chief Economist at the Agricultural Business Chamber of South Africa, AgBiz for short.